Welcome to this episode of Talking Development. I'm excited to be here with you again today. And today my guest is actually the best of two worlds because it is Masood Ahmed, who has worked in the bank and outside. Today he's the president of the Center of Global Development, which has so much overlap with the World Bank in terms of what we're trying to do. And I'm really excited to sit down to talk to him about issues of global concern where we're working closely as the international community to come together to think through solutions. Masood, welcome to my episode of Talking Development.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's always a pleasure to be back at the World Bank.
So my first question for you is going to be, not surprisingly, the world is living through a time of crisis. People refer to it as a Polycrisis, one after the other, sometimes overlapping, be it food insecurity, be it conflict, be it debt distress, unfortunately, poverty on the rise. And my question for you is, have you ever lived through something like this in your professional career? And if so, how do you think back and what can we learn today from what we've seen in the past?
To be honest, Anna, I don't think that in my professional career, we went through a time where all these different crises came together. The closest I come to it is in the 1980s. Commodity prices went down, interest rates shot up, the US slowed down, the world economy slowed down. There was a big debt problem. We lost a decade in Latin America. We lost a decade and more in Africa. And it took over a decade for the world to come together and recognize that you needed different ways of working to try and help countries in the new reality. And I think that's my one big takeaway from that experience is you can't solve this kind of crisis without rethinking fundamentally some of the things that we've taken for granted in the past. But tell me, you've also now been in the bank many years, seen many countries trying to address these issues, help them in different ways. Looking back in your career, do you see something that was comparable or where we can draw some lessons?
Like you, I also find it is so challenging right now because it's not happening in only one part of the world. It's really happening all over the world. So what I'm really taking with me as I stepped into this role is this acute sense that we have to be operating on dual speeds. And I've been talking about that, which is we are in crisis mode. We have to help client countries through this, but we are also an institution that has to think medium term, because if we don't deal with these pressing issues of maybe running the risk of losing a decade because of low growth, lack of investments, lack of learning. I'm going to turn back to you now. Another issue that we also find is that these challenges are, as we just exchanged, quite enormous. And I think what we're all realizing is no institution can solve this by themselves, whether it's a multilateral, a bilateral, NGO, think tanks. And there's, of course, a huge push right now to rethink how do we do international development the best. You're a real thought leader on this, and I know you're very active right now also thinking through what reforms are needed for the international development architecture. Can you share with us some of the thinking, some of your thoughts on this and perspectives on this?
I think the good starting point is that we used to be fairly clear about what our purpose was. It's development cooperation. It was about trying to deal with poverty, help countries deal with challenges that they faced. We were quite confident that we had the tools to be able to do that. And there was a degree of trust across the system. I think all of that is changing now. So now the things we are being asked to do as development cooperation agencies are much broader. We need to take on board global challenges, climate, pandemics, biodiversity, in ways that are much more central for our work. In those new areas, we're still trying to define what are the metrics by which we judge impact. How do we make sure that the money that is being spent, the work that we're doing actually delivers results? And I also think there's been a breakdown of trust in institutions, a breakdown of trust that comes from the way many countries in Africa, elsewhere, felt they were left behind in the post-COVID recovery, in the way they see now facing food and fuel price hikes and the support the world is providing them. And I think the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, has had a spillover in terms of the way other countries think about trust. So the nature of the work is changing. And the big challenge for development agencies, including the World Bank, is going to be how do we adapt to recognizing that this new world means we too have to not only respond to the change, but shape the change. And I think that's what the World Bank is now attempting to do. You have an evolution roadmap, which is a process for defining its reform. And I think a lot of people are very curious about the evolution roadmap, but more stepping back from the actual roadmap, how do you see for the World Bank, looking out 5 years or 10 years, how will the World Bank be different from the bank that you worked in, I worked in a long, long time ago?
Yeah. Great question. And, so much thinking is going into this now. And for me, sort of in this institution, 27 years, I think you realize with each year just how complicated the world can be and how integrated solutions have to be impactful. So my first sort of recollection, I think, is that we need to acknowledge the complexity of development. We need to continue, I believe, very much to harness the power of our country-based model, but recognizing really, and this is why I believe in this focus on global challenges, that countries share a lot of common concerns and challenges that are borderless or have impact in one country, one region, and they cross over. So it's really kind of analyzing these issues and bringing them together and seeing which parts need to come together to make the impact. So, I used to grow up in this institution working as an energy specialist. I was so focused on my energy projects. Today, I see energy is actually energy, governance, macrofiscal, environment, poverty reduction. So how do you bring all of this together? And of course, climate. So how do you bring all of this together? It requires that we really think multidisciplinary, we work multidisciplinary, we program multidisciplinary. And that means we have to think differently about our operational model. We have to think differently about how we design projects, how we bring teams together, how we use the budget as a lever, how we use performance management, and perhaps most importantly, how we work with others. People always ask me, and I'm going to ask you this, is there like one experience or one lesson from your years in development that you feel I wish I could replicate, or I should be replicating, or I did replicate because you felt it worked?
I want to go back again to the end of the 1980s and the 90s when in the bank we came together with this initiative on dealing with the debt of poor countries, HIPC, and alongside that an approach to organize development support around country-led strategies that focused on trying to deal with poverty reduction. And the substance of it was important, but the real lesson for me was that the political leadership of the world can be favorable or less favorable at any given time. But the intellectual and policy content to help shape the political will has to come from the kind of people that sit inside the World Bank. So the World Bank has a very special role, along with other development banks, but I think the World Bank has a very special role, which is to provide the policy content that is the right way of dealing with a problem that is politically savvy, but that also gets to the heart of the substance. And I think that's the unique combination that the bank can bring, that I felt at that time the bank did bring, and that I'm pretty confident you will continue to bring to the table. Now, what's your big takeaway from all the time you've been here? The one thing you hold dear?
There's so many, but I have to say the last few years I have been over and over and over again absolutely convinced that digital has to be part of the solution. Why? Because it's the one good thing that came out of COVID. We all had to go digital. Countries went digital, invested in digital. It helped. I see now, because I worked on Ukraine very intensively over the past year, this application they have called DIA, which is something every citizen has, with 80 plus applications on it. You can get everything, including now internally displaced people's, support, your subsidies for energy, your birth certificate, your COVID, you get everything on this. So I'm right now very interested in seeing how we utilize this opportunity to really go much more radical on digital. And that's what I'm advising every government to do, to basically says these services are no longer going to be available in any other mean. And I think that's the way we need to sort of push and shape it. So that's been a big revelation for me, and something I really wake up every morning thinking we really need to stay focused on this and play our part. So
Good luck with that.
well, thank you. And it's so good to see you.
Thank you very much, Anna.
And thank you so much for checking in with this episode of Talking Development. I hope you enjoyed this chat as much as I did, and I look forward to seeing you soon again.